Now page 24. Squabbling with each other, they shout and swear, laugh and weep, interrupt the storyteller, pass compliments, and thereby keep alive the spirit of life. In this way, a comedy of action goes through the whole poem, and the spectacle of the pilgrims provides the best of life in the lighter vein. It is safe to say that the great deal of the vivacity and veracity in Chaucer's portraits and picture of life is due to the all-pervading humor. No one can deny it. Chaucer's language. It is said that Emperor Augustus had found Rome a city of brick. When he died, he left a city of marble. He rendered meritorious services to the Roman Empire. Similarly, it can be said of Chaucer that he found English a dialect and left it a language which fitted to express the finest thoughts of the literary artists of his time. Lowell has remarked that Chaucer found his native tongue dialect and left it a language. It means that Chaucer rendered an incalculable service to the English language by making it an instrument of social, political, and literary thought. He rendered the same service to the English language as Dante, the Italian poet, had done to the Italian language. Before Chaucer, English was a despised language, little used by the upper classes. A certain number of dreary words written chiefly for homiletic purposes, homiletic, homiletic purposes, or in order to appeal to the humble people, are to be found in the half century before Chaucer. They are poor and vapid and feeble, giving no promise of the new dawn. Then arose the morning star. Chaucer adopted the despised English tongue and set himself to modify it, to shape it, to polish it, to render it fit for his purpose. He imported words from the French. He purified the English of his time from dross. He shaped it into a fit instrument for his use. In English in 1360, no dialect had as yet taken the lead for literary purpose. In English in 1360, no dialect had as yet taken the lead for literary purpose. There was no one standard form of speech which claimed preeminence over the others. English was split up into 4 dialects, differing sufficiently from each other to hamper intercommunication. The difference in vocabulary and syntax was such as to render man barely intelligible to those who did not speak his own dialect. The 3 principal dialects were the southern, midland, northern. Of these, the midland and northern. Of these, the midland, or to be more precise, the East Midland dialects, were the simplest in its grammatical structure and free from inflections than the other 2. It bore thus a close resemblance in appearance and substance to the language of today. The East Midland dialect had found favor with the poets and prose writers of the times. Wycliffe had translated the Bible in this dialect, and Gower, 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 after making experiments in French and Latin, had come round to the East Midland dialect in his English work of Confessio Amantis. Chaucer followed the lead of Gower, who popularized the East Midland dialect, gave it a new form and shape till it became the suitable medium of expression both in the court and in the universities. It was a great task that Chaucer undertook to perform because the difficulties in his way were numerous and equally formidable. Latin and French languages were still in vogue and holding sway over the minds of the people, and were being employed by poets and prose writers in their works. Under the inspiring leadership of Chaucer, the court was still under the inspiring leadership of Chaucer, the law courts banished Norman French in 1362, and the Parliament followed suit in the same year. In 1385, the schools adopted it as well. Chaucer was heralded as the first national poet who gave to the people a language so reformed and reshaped as to be a potent instrument for the expression of thought. The Canterbury Tales is a landmark in the history of English poetry as well as in the English language. The language of Chaucer is as intelligible as that of Shakespeare and Spenser. Spenser. English before Chaucer could not be understood without the aid of grammar and a glossary, but Chaucer's language is quite intelligible even today without the help of grammar or a glossary. Chaucer's contributions to the development of English was in making the dialect of London the standard for future writers and the parent of current modern English. He imparted to his native tongue smoothness and suppleness which it had not known since the Norman times, and breathed into this dialect a high political life. Blake was well summed up Chaucer's contribution to the English language in the following words. He imparted to his native tongue smoothness and suppleness which it had not known since the Norman times, and breathed into this dialect a high political life. Blake has well summed up Chaucer's contribution to the English language in the following words. It was Chaucer's good fortune, rather than his merit, that the natural vehicle of his poetry should have been that form of English speech which, for geographical and political reasons, was bound to become the prevailing standard of the literary language of England, namely the dialect of London. End of page 24, now page 25. Chaucer, being by birth a Londoner, spoke and wrote a language, the basis of which was East Midland, but which was largely affected by southern and Kentish peculiarities. Chaucer's versification, Versification, versification. The only form of versification known to the people of England before Chaucer was alliteration. Chaucer made substantial improvements and additions to English versification. Two of the most important poems of the 14th century, namely Piers the Ploughman and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, were written in alliterative verse. The use of the ancient meter in these poems was partly inspired by the revival of poetry in the West Midland, but alliterative verse was still the main attraction in poetic expression. Rhyme was also employed, and poets before Chaucer showed the greatest ingenuity in devising complex stanza forms which fashioned their rhymes down in the most complicated pattern in stanza forms. Chaucer had no liking for rhyme and no love for alliterative verse. He made a travesty of the doggerel rhyme in the rhyme of Sir Thopas. This work is a capital burlesque of the metrical romances of his times. Burlesque, Burlesque. Burlesque. Chaucer employed three principal meters: the 8-syllable line rhyming in couplets as in the Book of Duchess, the 10-syllable line also rhyming in couplets as the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, and the same line arranged in 7-line stanzas, later known as the rhyme royal, as in Troilus and Cressida. The heroic couplet he introduced into English verse, the rhyme royal he invented. In his shorter poems, he made, however, endless metrical experiments and showed a mastery of intricate verse forms remarkable even in an age when the French had made verse writing a matter of almost gymnastic drill. Chief among these are the difficult but exquisite rondel. Now, quote, now welcome summer to thy son soft day, which closes the parliament of fowls, and the ballad flee to the press. In the Monk's Tale, flee to the priest. In the Monk's Tale, there is melodious measure which may have furnished the model for Spenser's famous stanza. In the 16th century and later, when owing to the changes of pronunciation, especially the loss of a final E from thousands of words and grammatical forms, the secret Chaucer's versification was lost. He was regarded as a barbarous writer, ignorant of prosody, prosody, and without any ear for the melody of verse. But this was wrong approach to the poet's metrical skill and melodious verse. Chaucer was an artist in verse effects, and he not only wrote with the metrical accuracy, fluency, and variety that have rarely been surpassed, but also paid constant and delicate heed to the niceties of rhythm and tone color. In a half humorous address to his scrivener Adam, he calls down curses upon that unworthy servant for spoiling good verses by bay copying, and in Troilus and Cressida he beseeches his readers not mismeter his book. In the 16th century and later on, when owing to the changes on punctuation, especially the loss of the final E from thousands of words and grammatical forms, the secret Chaucer's versification was lost. He was regarded as a barbarous writer, ignorant of prosody, and without any fear for the melody of verse. But this was a wrong approach to the poet's metrical skill and melodious verse. Chaucer was an artist in verse effects, and he not only wrote with the metrical accuracy, fluency, and variety that have rarely been surpassed, but also paid constant and delicate heed to the niceties of rhythm and tone color. In a half-humorous address to his scrivener Adam, he calls down curses upon that unworthy servant for spoiling good verses by bay-copying, and in the Troilus and Cressida he besieges his readers not to mismeter his book. Chaucer's poetry is extremely musical and must be judged by the ear rather than the eye. From his very earliest poems, his work is almost faultless, and as he progressed in skill, his music became constantly more varied and flexible. His early manner reaches its height in the exquisite rondel, rondel, intricate in form but handled with great simplicity of effect, which brings the Parliament of Fowls to a melodious close. A good example of his later music may be found in the description of the Temple of Venus in the Knight's Tales, or as a study in a graver key in the ballad Flee Fro the Priest, which makes so impressively the deepening seriousness of Chaucer's mind in his later years. Writing about Chaucer's musical skill, W. J. Long beautifully remarks, Chaucer's poetry is extremely musical and must be judged by the ear rather than by the eye. To the modern reader, the lines appear broken and uneven, but if one reads them over a few times, he soon catches the perfect swing of the measure and finds that he is in the hands of a master whose ear is delicately sensitive to the smallest accent. There is a life in all his lines, which is marvelous when we consider that he is the first to show us the poetic possibilities of the language. His claim upon our gratitude is twofold. First, discovering the music that is in our English, and second, for his influence in fixing the Midland English East dialect as the literary language of England. Chaucer's services to English metre and diction were immense. He had a firm grasp on the true way of wedding the stressed and syllable systems by accommodating metrical ictus to ictus to natural accent. However, above all, he naturalized the iambic pentameter, first in stanzas of 8 or of 7 lines, the latter the famous rhyme royal, then in the still more famous heroic couplet. End of page 25, now page 26. The tetrameter is a fine measure in its way, but for variety and flexibility it is far inferior to the pentameter, which we can scarcely realize than by turning from Chaucer to his contemporary Gower. He abandoned altogether the old English irregular lines and alliterations and adopted the French method of regular meter and end rhymes. Under his influence, rhyme gradually displaced alliteration in English poetry. He was justly called the morning star of song, who made his music heard below, Don Chaucer, the first warbler, whose sweet breath preluded those melodious bursts that fill the spacious times of great Elizabeth with sounds that echo still. Chaucer as a satirist and an ironist. Satirist is found in the world of Chaucer, but it is always gentle. hardly severe, and never savage. His humour was not tinged with fierce and biting satire. Milk of human kindness flowed in the veins of Chaucer, which made him a friend rather than a foe of humanity. Emily Legius remarks, "Of all writers of genius, Chaucer is the one with whom it is easiest to have a sense of comradeship. He was willing to depict a world in which the sun shone upon the just and the just and the unjust, and the latter seemed to have a liberal share of the umbrella to save himself from the scorching heat of the sun. For the pleasure and amusement of people of the world, Chaucer, like Shakespeare and Fielding, had the keenest sense of ludicrous, the incongruous, and the comical in life, manners, and circumstances. He seldom took recourse to bitter and savage satire to chastise people stained with spots. The severe savage satire, which is like a cold, biting, and freezing wind, can be discerned not in sympathetic Chaucer, but in rabid castigators like Ben Jonson, Swift, and Pope. The aim of Ben Jonson was to the follies of the time, as he himself said, quote, "I'll strip the ragged follies of the time, naked as at their birth, and with a whip of steel print wounding lashes on their iron ribs." Pope was also a bitter satirist. He was proud of his power of satire, as he said, "Yes, I am proud. I must be proud to see men not afraid of God, afraid of me, safe from the bar, the pulpit and throne, you touched and shamed by ridicule alone." But Chaucer was not a rabid castigator of the evils that were running rampant in every nook and corner of his society, especially in the church and the court. He did not lash the stronghold of corruption mercilessly, he simply laughed at them and made us laugh. Bitter satire, in fact, did not penetrate the sympathetic and genial outlook of Chaucer. His interest lies in portraiture rather than exposure. His object is to paint life as he sees it, to hold up mirror to nature, as he has justly been said, "A mirror has no tendency. It reflects, but it does not and should not distort." There is a place in the world for anger, as there is a place in literature for satire and the savage condemnation of wickedness. But anger and satire are far removed from the serene and sunny irony of Chaucer. Not satire, but irony is the forte of Chaucer, and irony and humour are so pervasive and pervading in the prologue and Chaucer's work as a whole that without continual watchfulness and vigilance one is in the danger of missing this elusive flame. It is like summer lightning which, says Selincourt, flickering all around the horizon, is as often as not behind one's back, so that one wonders if the sense of light upon the eye was a flash indeed, or the memory of a flash. The Chaucerian irony is sometimes so large that it is too large to be seen, says G.K. Chesterton. The rhyme of Sir Topas has been wrongly considered as a parody of certain bad romantic verses of Chaucer's age. In reality, the joke is not that Chaucer is joking at the expense of bad ballad mongers, but the joke is too broad to be seen by jaded mind. Chaucer is making fun of not only bad poets but also of good poets. But the parody, said Chesterton, is not the point. The point is in the admirable irony of the whole conception of the dumb or doggerel rhythm, who is nevertheless the author of all the other rhymes, nay, even the author of their authors. Among all pilgrims, the poet is the only person who knows no poetry. The prologue is replete with Chaucerian irony. We have the description of Madame Elegantine, French, which was not the correct French as spoken in Paris, but the French of an English finishing school, which of course was very different matter. Quote, and French she spake full fair and fetishly after the school of Starford at Bow, for French of Paris was to hire unknown. The monk who had deserted his ecclesiastical duties came under the province of irony. He hath not that text a pulled hen that saith that hunters bet not holy men. Chaucer's jest is obvious in the case of the merchant who was always thinking about his profits. This worthy man full well his wit beset, there was wist no right that he was in a debt. Chaucer's irony is crystal clear when he says that the lawyer was the busiest man in England, and he seemed busier than he was. Chaucer's remarks about the doctor of physic are equally ironical, for gold in physic is cordial, therefore he loveth gold in special. Irony is visible in the much married wife of Bath. She had enjoyed happiness with 5 husbands, and she was quite prepared for the 6th. There is an ironical remark about her hood. His covers she achieves full fine worn of the ground. I dost swear they weighed in 10 pound. The use of irony can also be seen in the hypocritical reeve. His lard well could be fleshen subtly to Eve and lean him of his own good, and have a thank and yet a gone and hood. Irony has passed through the whole gallery of portraits. Each of the portraits contains subtle fun or friendly mockery. A roguish, playful irony is one of his commonest weapons. Satire and serious admiration help, but good humor is always in his right hand. Chaucer as a poet of the people. In spite of his sympathy for the downtrodden and the common people, Chaucer wrote for the court, the nobility and cultivated classes, to whom the sufferings and pathetic groanings of the masses were a matter of utmost indifference. In the 14th century, aristocratic people had food in abundance, but poor villagers were dying of black death and famines. In consequence, indignation against aristocracy was spreading like wildfire among the masses, but it proved of no avail. The appeals of the poor fell flat on the deaf ears of the nobility. Even in these hard times, Chaucer did not champion the cause of the poor, but he lulled the courtiers by his poetry. The aim of Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales was to represent the microcosm of English society. He represented the wide and variegated 14th century life in the Canterbury Tales, but Chaucer, in spite of his broad outlook and humanity, did not touch the burning social problems of the 14th century, the plague, the peasant uprising and the lorardry. The peasant rebellion and the Lollard agitation, say Moody and Lowett, give us glimpses of an England which Chaucer, in spite of the many-sidedness of his work, did not reveal. The Canterbury Tales contained very few references to the plague, only one to the peasant uprising, and only one to Lollardy, and these references are casual or jesting. Chaucer did not mix with the common people, he kept himself aloof from the mob. He had no deep feeling and regard for the crowd, which is evident not only from his sketches of the crowd but also by such references as this in the Clerk's Tale. Quote, O stormy people, unsad and ever unstew, as undiscreet and chaunzing as a vane. In spite of his of his aloofness from the poor, Chaucer was not completely devoid of sympathy for the common and crawling. Chaucer was not a reformer, but he disliked tyranny and misuse, injustice as fiercely as he loathed cant and hypocrisy. Though Chaucer, like Keats, carried no burden at all, yet he laid his finger on disposition and oppression. In the following passage from the Parson's Tale, we can show that he became a spokesman, a voice of the masses. He admirably put forth the cause of the poor. Think also, quote, think also that of the same seed of which churls spring, of the same seed spring lords, as well may the churl be saved as the Lord. Therefore I counsel thee to just so with the churl as thou wouldest thy Lord with thee, if thou wert in his plight. I counsel thee certainly, thou Lord, that thou work is in which wise with thy churls, that they rather love thee than dread thee. In this bread of human sympathy, though not in depth of passion, Chaucer was Shakespearean. The milk of human kindness, the matter in which the blood was in this bread of human sympathy, though not in depth of passion, Chaucer said was Shakespearean. In his milk of human kindness, this sympathy with the poor was strongly felt by Chaucer, or by Shakespeare. Both Chaucer and Shakespeare, like Juvenal, did not fall foul upon their characters. There was a spirit of sunny endeavour about Chaucer and Shakespeare to make themselves things better.